So they called this the Optimizing Operations Tech Growth from Hospitality. I'm not sure where that came from. But what we're going to call it is the coming restaurant apocalypse that isn't. And what we mean by isn't is that's bad grammar, but it's not actually happening. And why am I calling it the coming restaurant apocalypse? Well, this article came out a couple weeks ago, Dinner Disrupted, Daniel Duane. And in that, he said a restaurant apocalypse is nigh. And he's not the only one to call it an apocalypse. David Chang wrote this article in GQ in which he talks about the razor-thin margins, like the smallest single digits. It's the dumbest business you could get into. Why are so many great restaurants closing in New York? It's the rents. It's not the rents. It's more than that. It seems we are dangerously close to a tipping point. The thrill of losing money by investing in a Manhattan restaurant, that was in the New Yorker just a couple of weeks ago. The co-owner, I love this one. Danny, apparently we can't make any money unless we're dishonest. That makes no sense. Sierra, who's probably here. Is Sierra here? Love her writing. Hi, Sierra. She wrote about 30 acres and said this is why it closed. And then Alma closed in Los Angeles. Why did Alma close? Well, they were too busy, apparently. We love them too much, is what the LA Times said. So we're going to talk a little bit about restaurant operations and how we think of them differently. We are going to do this 63 slides, 19 seconds each, I was told. And we're not going to be comprehensive here at all because we can't in only 20 minutes.
Thanks. So I'm the engineering side of talk, and I like engineering, I like data, I like facts, that sort of thing, I like numbers. I like really weird scatter graphs. So this isn't a piece of abstract art you're looking at here. This is just a sampling of gross margins of various restaurants. Okay, this is what various journalists are calling the restaurant apocalypse. Now, every restaurateur I've talked to knows two numbers. They can give me top of their head. They can give me gross margin, and then they can give me check average really quickly. They know those numbers. So everyone think about those numbers and take a look at this. Where do you fall on this? Is this the restaurant apocalypse? No, it's not. However, economic pressures are always rising and that sort of thing. So what happens is you see a change. You see zeros start to move upwards and reset. And so this bottom part is the restaurant apocalypse. Up here is where you need to be. The problem is it's constantly becoming more competitive. It's constantly rising. So you can't sit around and be happy with a margin of 3, 4, 5% or 6%. You've always got to be working to improve operations, just as you're working to improve hospitality or any quality in a restaurant. And the reason I like the data side of it, the reason I like software and engineering is because it's a strategy that you can use to really build on. And I tell people that hope, while a really great thing, is not a strategy. And it's not going to get you out of being down below that line where you need to be. So I've talked about percentages, but percentages don't pay the bills, so don't look at those. And what does that mean? The problem with data, if you've got really broad strokes, is that you really can't do a lot. That's not actionable. You go to the chef and you say, food costs have been 34% for the past 3 months. Suddenly last week they went up to 38%. I'm going to need you to cut that back. How's that actionable? What are you supposed to do with that? What do? You look at your biggest cost, you start cutting back on quality of protein or something like that? Do you serve smart? What do? You often make bad decisions if you have bad data. So I like lots of data. I like things that are really easy to understand, even if they're not always pretty. So this is what it's called a Marimekko graph. It's not exactly the most gorgeous thing, but you can look at that, and the area of each square shows you how much money you're spending on different things. So you can see really quickly about a third of your cost is produce, 2/3 of your cost is produce and protein, and then a lot of other things fill in.
And we hand that to the chefs every single week at our restaurant group. And what we notice is that all of a sudden they look at it and they can see the vendors. Now we anonymize that. But they can look at the vendor and they go, there's no way I spent that much last week. So your accountant might not know that they get that bill, but your chef goes, there's no way we did that. And so all of a sudden the chefs become very accountable, and it's a visual representation, which is very easy for them to understand.
So it makes it easier to find errors, first and foremost, but second of all, it makes it easier to just let chefs know what the heck's going on. Okay? The first time this went out, the chef said, oh my God, I couldn't possibly be spending that much on microgreens. And like, yeah, actually, they looked through everything, and it turned out they were. He's like, well, we can cut back on a bunch of this stuff. We really don't need this. It's just like we're nerding out on microgreens. So it happens, right? So with that, I'll hand it back to Nick.
So we can't possibly dwell on this, but we eliminated tipping in our restaurant group 5 years ago. The FLSA, if you go in there and read it, which I encourage everyone to do so, treats every single restaurant employee essentially the same whether you work in fast casual or a $500 check average restaurant. That is completely broken. We know that it's broken because people like this have been sued. These are all people that I respect, and I've actually read all these cases. I've had them pulled. And I don't believe that any of these people are actually stealing from their employees. What I think is that there's essentially two different restaurant industries going. And so at the end of the day, what you don't know about tips will kill you. But I'm going to say right now, flat out, hey, Dan's going to love that got a joke. Our designer did that one. At the end of the day, we all need to work together to really change this and make sure that restaurant employees are treated as the professionals they are. We're working really, really hard to do that. And I think collectively as an industry, we need to change. We're not going to change the FLSA, so we're going to need to agree that embedded tipping, service charges where that's available, depending on the state and city and all of that, really has to change. I'm going to write a really long article on that, but I can't do it here.
Thanks. So my background is open source. I was in charge of all open data at Google. So if you keep data in Google and you can get it out, that's a lot of my doing and my team's doing. So open has always been better than closed to me. I'm a big fan of the internet. I practically worked for the internet. So I love little diagrams like this that show the internet, even though it's supposed to be a cloud. Bear with me. It's a circle here. But if you take a look at the internet, really big, billions of people, Google touches a huge majority of it. Facebook and Twitter are massive parts of that, right? That's really, really big. Restaurant apps and booking systems and that sort of thing focus on a lot of things like affiliate networks and building a network and to send more to incremental diners to the restaurant. The problem with that is that that's a really, really, really small part of the internet as a whole. So if you're focusing on building this one little tight group that can send things your way, you're ignoring a huge part of the world, and a part of the world that you can get a lot of information from, a part of the world that you can have a lot of control over how you interact with, which is really huge. So a big part of that is search and social, and that goes for other social networks, Instagram, Snapchat, et cetera. It's getting easier and easier for any individual business to reach out to these restaurants, and we're working with them, with these companies, to integrate this with our booking system so that it's really easy for you to sort of click a button. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the talk. But I want to briefly talk about engineering and data. So again, it's important to provide great data and insights based on sales of your bookings and what's going on with your restaurant so that you can make good decisions. Better data, better decisions. The engineering part's also really important to us. So we've basically developed everything in-house. I've built a world-class engineering team and, quite frankly, a world-class product. Now, a lot of the people we talk to, they say, that's really great. I'm so excited. You sound like you have a cool company. How can I download your app? Ah, yes, thank you. I didn't have to pay you for that. That's great. Apps are where it's everybody wants an app. My local park in Chicago has a freaking app for something that should be on a web page. Now, I'd say 29 out of 30 should be out of 30 apps should be a web page. So I'm really against apps for a great majority of these things because you're creating a small circle. You've got to build that circle up. People download that app, and technology people who are trying to sell you an app will tell you, you need to get on that home screen. Well, guess what? You're not going to be on that home screen unless you're Google Maps or Facebook or Uber or Twitter. You're going to be on the 5th screen in a folder marked stuff I had to download to go out to eat. I'm very serious. I'm very serious. So that's something to think about.
Which brings us to this, booking your restaurant. We are building a booking system. There's an elephant in the room. We're going to talk about the elephant, even though I'm not supposed to. That is Mark Zuckerberg in 1998. He was just a child. That was the cell phone that you used in 1998, and that was the booking system that you used in 1998. And when I went to MARTA last night, that was what the screen looked like at the front door. We are trying to do something completely different. That's a skeuomorphic design. Skeuomorphic design means that you took what you had in a tactile world, converted it to the digital world, right? And that's what everyone did when the computers were first being built, right? Steve Jobs loved skeuomorphic design. And so you ended up with a booking system that basically said, people pick up a phone and they call my restaurant, and so we need a book, a digital one. And we're going to just answer the phones and put the names into a book. And then those people are going to come to the restaurant because they have a reservation. And what I noticed when I got into the restaurant business, having not been in the restaurant business, is that reservations were broken. 8 to 10% of the people didn't show up. A lot of people would make a 6 top reservation and show up with 4 people, having no intention of ever having 6. It was just the only table that they could get. So we had slippage of about $700,000 a year just in short-seated tables, and we tracked all of that. And so when we first sat down and said, how do we want to redesign this from scratch? So I built a really crappy system in 2011 for Next Restaurant, but it worked. We sold $527,000 in tickets in the first day that we opened it up. And it was a terrible system. So it was terrible. So I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago saying a lot of the stuff that we're talking about now in a nascent form. And then we sat down and we worked with our design and engineering team. And what we came up with is that what you're really booking at is an experience. What you're looking at is an experience. And one of my favorite restaurants in the entire world is Gramercy Tavern. In Gramercy Tavern, there are 5 experiences. When you walk in the door, you could go private dining, you could go eat at the bar, and then within the main dining room, you have an a la carte menu, and you essentially have 2 tasting menus, both of which are awesome. And yet, before you walk in the door, no one knows what you're going to get, and so you can't plan for it appropriately. The customer may not even know that that's happening. Then the whole table has to get the tasting menu, all that sort of thing. So we actually say, choose an experience. So instead of asking a question, how many people and what time, we say, book an experience. And what we notice is a couple magical things happen. People start looking at it and going, oh, I didn't know that existed, or I didn't know that wine tasting or that event was coming up. And so the upsell, quote unquote, which feels really smarmy at the table, suddenly feels like choice to the consumer. And a behavioral economist will look at that and go, wow, we're just letting people guide themselves through this experience. The back end of Talk, really clean. And we had to think of templating in new ways. So on the left there, you'll see that's what our calendar page looks like. Red is sold, yellow is unsold, green is unsold, yellow is held. On the right, your booking and templating. We have all the CRM built in. It ties into all the Facebook, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. You can do tags, and we treat the restaurant group. If you own 25 restaurants, that customer exists for you personally, not for Talk across your entire restaurant group. We do not want to own your customers. You should own your customers because you're the one spending money on doing all of that. The templating on the back end, we can mix a la carte with main dining room, with prep kitchen, hearth. This is our new restaurant called Royster that we opened 4 months ago. And you can see that I have a mix of pricing. I have deposits to cut down on no-shows on busy days. I can template it differently for different days. There's no way I can go through all this. And then we can also add supplements as well. So fun story, when we did a pop-up for Alinea down in Miami, everything in Miami is gold bling, right? I went down there to visit, there's gold everywhere. A lot of bling in Miami. So as a joke, I created a gold wine pairing, and I put $695 on it, figuring someone's gonna buy it, and I told our SOM team, even if you lose money on it, I don't care, it's just for the bling, it's for fun. And so what happened was, we used to sell about 8% reserve pairings, and now all of a sudden we sold 35% reserve pairings. Why? Because it's the middle damn button. And now when we reopened Alinea...
It looks cheap compared to $695.
Oh, yeah. And it's the same reason you put the $100 steak to sell a $60 steak. That stuff actually works. So this is our French Laundry menu that we're currently doing at Next. You'll notice that there's an ultra reserve pairing. And you'll also notice that Alinea now, when we reopened it, there are 3 menus and 3 pairings, including an Alinea pairing, which no one buys. That's totally fine. We could do lunch with ordinary reservations. And then table management. We got rid of the skeuomorphic design. And why do we do that? Because you don't need it. This is a web-based system. If you want to have 25 of these in your restaurant, if you want them at the expo station, you can drop an iPad there, and you can see this. You can have your valet put into this. You can have all that. Better hospitality, cleaner service, and it's got a chat window built into it so that your staff can talk to each other. I have this every day at my dining room table at my house with all of our restaurants open in tabs, and I can literally type to each of our expo stations when someone important comes in or I see something.
His wife has never forgiven me.
She's not happy about that. So the results of that, a couple of examples. Lume Restaurant, Melbourne, Australia. We're now in 9 countries, 37 cities. Lume was a great little chef-driven restaurant, and they had about 8% tasting menus. They were an a la carte restaurant. They were losing about $3,500 a week on no-shows by their estimates. After 4 months on Talk, they've moved to tasting menus only because it kept going more and more towards that. People suddenly realized, hey, we didn't even know they had this. They are now nearly tripled their profits and margins for the year, changed their life. Farm Spirit Table, 12-seat, farm-to-table vegan restaurant in Portland, as only can be done in Portland. He basically said he wouldn't exist anymore if he didn't switch over to this because he would have a 2-top no-show, and that was his entire day that went away because it's only serving 16 people a night. This has changed his life. Acadia, a Michelin 2-star in Chicago, $34,000 in increased profits year over year after making the switch to Talk in August, which is a slow month. And then a couple weeks ago, the Jelanaz Shuffle, which is, I think, 41 restaurants in I don't know how many countries. Really, you can only do something like this with a web-based system that is open and across the world. 41 restaurants around the world launched simultaneously, sold out $400,000 or $500,000 of seats in an hour. So we can virtually eliminate no-shows, increase dollar sales, reduce waste, lower costs, communicate directly with their patrons, and really swipe, not dial. I used to think hospitality was about talking to people. A lot of people say they want the human connection. If you call my phone to confirm a reservation right now, that's an invasion of my privacy as far as I'm concerned, because I don't have your number in there. So I want an email confirmation with the option to call the restaurant if I so choose. But I don't want you automatically doing that. And I really don't want to call a restaurant ever to make a reservation again. I want to swipe, not dial. I think everybody under the age of 40 is like that as well.
Yep, absolutely. So I want to talk about owning your own customers. There's a lot of issues, I think, around intermediation, where somebody else wants to own your customer. They want you to be part of a network or something like that. This is a great quote. I think about this quote all the time. It was really big when I was at Google, obviously, because Google was into quantified data around where you're spending your advertising dollars, which is super important. Again, I'll come back to search and social. The great thing about search and social is that you can figure out where your money is going. You can figure out what's working for you. You can figure out what's not working for you. You can track conversions. You can find out that if you run an ad campaign, this works and gives you a certain number of dollars. You can find out if you run a different one, it works better or works worse. You can do A/B testing. You can do all this sort of stuff. And companies like us can actually automate a great deal of that, so you don't have to think about all this nerd crap, and you can get back to doing hospitality. The really cool thing about this isn't just that, but it's that you have control. You have direct relationships with your customers. You put people on a waiting list, something like that. You have a way of marketing to them. But beyond that, if you have a certain number of conversions and you've got, let's say you sell out, you could turn that spigot off and stop spending money. You don't have to. If you really need to get more folks in, you can open it up a little bit more and spend more money. You can see the exact return you're getting and if it's worth your money. So I'll hand it back to Nick for a little bit more.
So a couple of years ago, I wrote a blog post, about 7,000 words or whatever, and every 2 years I feel the need to do that. So this talk is sort of like a tiny little version of that. So in about a week, we're going to publish all the data that goes along with all of this on Medium. And we're going to talk about things like why walk-in restaurants is not the most efficient way. It's about high beta. Beta means variance. And if you're 74 and sunny and you have a line out the door that particular day, that's the most efficient way for sure. If not, it definitely isn't. And if lines are bad hospitality, that goes along with that. I think waiting in a line or being told to wait at the bar is actually bad hospitality. We want to eliminate that. Eliminating no-shows is a huge part of that. Reducing waste, we talked about. We're going to track that. Digital waitlists are an incredible marketing tool. When you make it really, really easy for someone to add themselves to a waitlist, people are picky. They see like 8 o'clock on a Saturday and they go, damn it, I want to go on the waitlist for 8 o'clock even though it's an 8:30. I still want to capture that person's information and I want to use it to market other things. As an example of that, we put as a checkbox on all of our checkout on Talk for our restaurants, just a little box saying, hey, if you want the chef to sign a cookbook. We used to sell, I don't know, 10, 15 a week. We're selling 22 a night. That's $1,500 a day per restaurant of incremental revenue because of a checkbox put on a checkout form. Do the math on that across 4 restaurants, and that goes right to the bottom line. There's no cost on that. And there's lots more coming. I want to leave you with a couple numbers. Some years ago, someone told me there's no way I'd ever sell a ticket to a restaurant. We have, with no marketing spend, no advertising, and no salespeople thus far, processed $103 million in prepaid bookings. It doesn't count the ordinary reservations and whatnot, but $103,246,000 as of yesterday in prepaid bookings. We are closing a round today of a $7.5 million round for Talk, so you will be hearing more about us. This is our first major sort of launch to sell. Among those people are sort of high-end industry, low-end industry, VCs and whatnot, but we really wanted to bring in industry people. So 11 Madison Park, Will Gadar and Daniel Hum are investors in Talk and on our hospitality board as of today. Andrew Zimmern is a completely different kind of chef and a completely different kind of personality. He's an investor. Let Us Entertain You and their 128 restaurants, about $600 million in revenue a year, are major investors and start moving over to that platform as well. And this is the final slide. David Chang said low single digits. Royster made 24.6% gross margins in our first month, which is the lowest of our 4 restaurants, but we have not yet had time to optimize it. Thank you.